Matthew Wilhelm-Solomon is a writer, editor, educator, and now author of a book he entitled The Blinded City, 10 Years in Inner-City Johannesburg. In the book, Matthew recounts the history of the inner city from 2010 to 2019, primarily from the perspectives of the unlawful occupiers of the spaces known as hijacked buildings, bad buildings, or dark buildings. For an in-depth discussion about this offering that's based on research he conducted during this decade, we're joined on Zoom by Matthew Wilhelm-Solomon. Matthew, a very good morning to you. A warm welcome to Morning Live. In your own words, give us a brief description of what the Blinded City and the story behind putting it together is.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. So the Blinded City is a history of the city from 2010 to 2019, but told from the perspectives of inner city residents, primarily the unlawful occupiers of buildings, often known as hijacked buildings, bad buildings, or dark buildings. But the story, rather than focusing on the criminality, focuses to tell the life story of those living under very difficult conditions, their struggles, their desires for a home in the city, their struggles with evictions, deportation. It's a story of both South Africans and foreign nationals. And also some of the key constitutional court cases around housing in the city and some of the key events over the past decade.
You know, I'm always interested to know the thought process behind a book's cover and title. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the cover itself is a photograph of an old carpet factory on 7 Saratoga Avenue. And this carpet factory was an occupation, unlawful occupation, although not a criminal occupation. And it became the center of a case known as a constitutional court case known as Blue Moonlight. And Blue Moonlight established that the city of Johannesburg was obliged to provide what was called temporary emergency accommodation for those to be evicted if they were to be rendered homeless. So it's a very important case, but part of the book also tells the story of a woman called Nomsa Ladla who lived with her granddaughter in this old carpet factory and her struggles for housing in the city. So that old carpet factory became really central to the story of the city. And the title, The Blinded City, as I said, the book is about both South Africans and foreign nationals. And some of the stories I tell through the book are also of blind Zimbabweans who were my guides also through the city and who explored the city. So it alludes to that. But it also alludes to other types of blindness, the blindness of white South Africans towards the apartheid past, the blindness of middle-class residents and political elites towards the ongoing suffering and violence in the inner city.
I mean, speak to us about, some of the notable cases that you narrate in the book.
So I've mentioned the Blue Moonlight case, which really established a lot of the struggles, particularly over eviction and housing. There are other major cases, one around in 2013, Operation Clean Sweep, where the city attempted to evict informal traders unlawfully. The continuation of the Blue Moonlight case was by called Ladla, known as Ladla itself, where the residents of a shelter called Ikuteleni struggled to argue that the city was splitting up families, and including Ladla and her granddaughter. So they took the city to court, and this established the principle that temporary emergency accommodation had to also be dignified. It was also a home in the city. There's several others, but another major case was against by housing activists and a legal NGO called SERI against the raids that took place under Mashaba's time as mayor in the city, but also against the Minister of Police. And this, the Constitutional Court judgment was last year, but established that Many of the raids were unconstitutional, that raided individuals' homes without a warrant under public order regulations. So there's several others, but what I've done in the book is to try select some key court cases, but tell these court cases not just through the law, but through the perspectives of inner city residents who've really lived and experienced these cases.
Another thing that the book touches on is migration, particularly in the Zimbabwe-South Africa context. Speak to us more about this.
Yeah, so there's a perception that unlawful occupations are primarily foreign national migrants. This isn't true. The occupants are both South Africans and foreign nationals. But one element of the issue is that you have many migrants living in the city, very precarious conditions. Some are undocumented, often some are deported. But what I try to get across is that these are also often poor residents of the region who are just trying to make a life, and often a life in Zimbabwe has not been possible due to political persecution, drought, economic collapse, and so on. And often when people have been deported or have gone back, they've come back to live in the city because life hasn't been possible in Zimbabwe or elsewhere. But the book isn't solely about migration. The book is really about the lives and the worlds and the histories of these unlawful occupations in the inner city, which also include many South Africans who've migrated into the city from other parts of the country, KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape.
Talk to us about some of the lessons that came with working on this project personally for you.
Well, I mean, Johannesburg is the city I grew up and love, but one of the key lessons is that any urban regeneration schemes for the city have to be pro-poor. They can't be targeted to the middle classes. There has to be an expansion of low-cost housing in the city for the lowest income groups, because many unlawful occupiers are simply there because they cannot afford decent accommodation. It's not that they want to live unlawfully. They're just looking for a decent life in the city. And a key lesson is that through my own process of establishing trust in spaces often considered dangerous, is that the city, but also government more widely, has to engage inner city residents, including unlawful occupiers, in shaping the city and planning the city, and often just targeting them through police raids or evictions or deportations hasn't solved the issue of crime, security, housing in the inner city. So there needs to be a really deeper and more participatory engagement with inner city residents.
I'm curious, now the people or, the case studies you mentioned in the book, have they read the book? What are their thoughts on the book?
Yeah, so as part of the outreach to the book, I've had free copies for housing movements in both Johannesburg and Cape Town. And so it's not just to a middle class audience. The book is also written for occupiers themselves and those. And in the process of writing the book, I also shared the stories as I was going along. So I tried as much as possible to engage through the process. And overall, the response has been really warm and really positive, and a belief that the book tells a story of the city that is often erased or misinterpreted. So the response has been very positive.
All right, Matthew, thank you so much for talking to us. Good luck with the book going forward.
Thank you so much for your time and for having me.
Matthew Wilhelm-Solomon was our guest author this morning, and we've been discussing his new book titled The Blinded City.